Pennsylvania congressman and retired U.S. Navy Admiral Joe Sestak is seeking the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate. What does he think of the nuclear deal with Iran, about Planned Parenthood and more, as well as his run for the Senate? We'll ask him. Good morning. I'm Steve Highsmith. This is In Focus. With me now is Joe Sestak. He served 2 terms in Congress, representing Delaware County and other parts of the 7th Congressional District, and is a candidate for U.S. Senate in next year's election in Pennsylvania. Sir, thanks for being here.
Good to be with you, Steve. Thanks.
Let's talk about Iran for a few minutes. The Iranians have not changed their tone very much since this deal, yet the deal is looking like it's going to go in place unless Congress can stop it. We still don't even know if that will stop it. You think it's a good deal. Why?
I'm a cautious supporter of this because in 30 days from today, Steve, Iran can have bomb-grade material for a nuclear weapon. 30 days. As a minimum, the benefit of this deal is it sets it back 1 year as we dilute that uranium and take the centrifuges that could get it more rich in order to become a fuel for a nuclear bomb and puts them in storage. And anyone who knows anything about centrifuges knows they decay there. This has to do with our security and Israel's security, as well as our troops stationed there in Bahrain and other places. Do we trust them? Heck no. I operated in the Persian Gulf with the Iranian Navy. Trust them. But neither did Ronald Reagan with the START talks with the Soviet Union. Verify before you trust. And if they cheat, the military option's still on the table.
The difference, some might say, though, is that with the Soviet Union, there was a logic that the Soviets operated by. With Iran, they are the largest state sponsor of terrorism. They are a destabilizing force in the region, even against people who otherwise would oppose Israel. And so to say that we're delaying it just a year, or at best case 10 years or 15 years, are we not buying them more time to strengthen their military if we eventually are going to have a military option anyway?
Steve, those are the same arguments made about the Soviet Union. Remember, they had proxies. They fought us in Korea. My wife actually goes into the archives of the Ukraine to find what pilots flew against ours so we can find the remains of our shot down today. They fought us in Vietnam. They had proxies throughout the world. They staged, actually did terrorist types of activities. But President Reagan understood that it's a dangerous world. It doesn't have to be an unsafe world if we're able to bring about, without military force, an improvement in our security. Think of this. 30 days from today, Iran's going to have a nuclear capability in terms of material for a bomb. Saudi Arabia is working with Pakistan and giving them billions of dollars because the under-the-table deal is they want one if Iran gets one. Does this advance our security? Yes, it does. But I don't trust them.
But there are people that say that Saudi Arabia and others are saying that they're so upset about this deal that they are going to quicken their pace to try to get their own nuclear weapons because they believe Iran is going to get one anyway.
They believe that today. But this agreement has been pushed hard by the other side. By that I mean Saudi Arabia and others. Oh, they want us to strike to destroy that. I've been in a study with about 20 generals and admirals the last couple of years, as well as other national defense people. We can strike them, but at most we can delay it for 4 years with our military. Fordo is under 300 feet of rock. Thousands of mines are going to be laid in that Persian Gulf. Hundreds of missiles are going to rain down, not just upon our ships there, but also our troops that are stationed in Bahrain and other places, and even Israel. And we'll have to knock down those advanced missiles. Our strikes will have to be wide in breadth, deep in scope. Can we do it? Sure we can. But if we can verify that they actually, with these 150 people going to be doing the inspection, are diluting their uranium, yes, we're more secure.
But you just said if we can verify, and there are those that say the delay of 24 days to get in, the appeals or the vetoes that could be done by Iran or appeals to the Security Council, the fact that they could be creating new facilities which we might not know exist, that the rhetoric from in past agreements, when nations have agreed on things, they usually talk nice to each other, at least right after the agreement. In this case, Iran is still saying death to America.
Remember Nikita Khrushchev of the Soviet Union, who came to America and took his shoe and beat it and says, "We will bury you." No, it's the same rhetoric as it always is. Remember the fights even afterwards when the START and SALT talks. We would catch the Soviet Union cheating and move them back into the box. So we'll do the same thing. And if they cheat, we can use this military option. But the strike is going to make the aftermath of Iraq look like a cakewalk.
Anyone who believes that a deal is better than no deal, that peace is better than war, would approve this deal. But if we still think that in Iran's case, there is a greater possibility of a military conflict, then is it better to do it now, in the next 30 days, or do it when we've lifted the sanctions against them about ballistic missiles and they would have better weaponry and more time to develop and more time to prepare? I think that's the fear. How can we dissuade someone from that fear that these people will just be stronger militarily 8 or 10 years from now?
I disagree with anyone who says any deal is a good deal. You look at the cost and the benefits, and if it improves our securities in Israel's, it's a deal that we should pursue. But understand this, we actually have sanctions that brought them to the table. But it only worked because Russia and China are doing it. Russia and China are going to walk away from this. And then the door opens to where all that technology comes in if we walk away after having come to this agreement. You know, we were pretty successful in making sure that this international coalition applied sanctions. And so those that say more crippling sanctions, no, what then happens is you open the door. As Russia has just completed a sale, it looks like, of S-300 defense systems for Iran. And soon, and they wanted all conventional weapons given to them now, and even offensive, and we said, like the chairman of, keep it closed as long as possible, up to 8 years, and that's what we've done.
Do you think that Israel is the greatest ally of the United States in the Middle East?
Oh, without a question. My wife actually worked with the military in Israel. I've been there 8 or 9 times. I sat there with the ambassador from Israel to America at a private dinner with him in his home with the chief of their Navy operations. When I was a congressman, they asked me to get the U.S. Navy to start selling them the littoral combat ships. Yes, they are our best ally there.
Well, then, how do you respond to this? Last week on this program, I was talking with Yaron Seidman, who is the Israeli Consul General for the Mid-Atlantic region, based in Philadelphia. And any student of history or anyone who was alive at that time knows how damaging the word appeasement is. And I asked him, let's take a look at his response. I asked him, is this nuclear agreement appeasement? And his quote was, I wouldn't shy away from that word. I think it's making far-fetched concessions to Iran that legitimizes it as a nuclear power.
Yes.
How do you respond to the nation you just described as a great ally that has that response?
I've been walking in other people's shoes. I've been to Israel, as I said, at least 8 times. I still have my shirt. Never again, Masada. I understand why they look at it that way and why we have to be their greatest ally. But as the former head of Mossad said, this is a deal we should follow. There is disagreement even within Israel on this issue. At the end of the day, with our ability to look, knowing we will do this strike, because Israel's ability to strike can only, in our assessment of that study I mentioned, could maybe close it down for a year or 2. Because militaries don't fix a problem. We can just stop a problem for a while. Even we only take 4 years. But as the former head of the Mossad said, this is a deal we should be trusting and verifying, but let's see if we can give it a chance to work. It'll be better for our Israel security.
Does it trouble you at all that, at least in my reading of the agreement, that no U.S. inspectors are allowed in, the IAEA is allowed in, but they can't be Americans?
You know, Steve, I've studied and worked this issue a long time. The IAEA is the toughest of organizations. They're the ones who found out that they were cheating the last time. They're pretty darn good. And we have the means, with our own national technical means, to be doubling down on all types of inspections.
Fair to say, though, that while this nuclear agreement prevents a war now, and it prevents, if you're correct, Iran from getting a nuclear weapon 30 days to 3 months from now, but at most a year from now, do you believe there's a greater than 50-50 chance that it prevents them from ever getting a nuclear weapon?
Wow. I'd really like to say that that's for certainty. I do believe it's a high probability that first they'll adhere initially to this for a year or 2 or 3. And then I think there is a probability that they will continue to follow it because things begin to change. Look, they don't like ISIS. You know that as well as I do. And all of a sudden, they've opened up a VIP section now in their airport, as Western nations are already starting to trade for capitalism. All of a sudden, things and dynamics begin to change. Remember the Soviet Union? We won that Cold War, that war without a kinetic energy war, by doing what we're doing today. Diplomacy, what we're doing should hurt. Those economic sanctions made them hurt, and now we have the ability to take the worst danger to us off the table.
We did not get American hostages back. We did not get American inspectors in there. There are other aspects that people will say we should have just gotten a little bit more because we have no leverage now.
Yes. Look, they have mines, thousands that can close the streets for moose, underwater activity, proxies. I wish we could have gotten them all when we did it with the Soviet Union. Remember, they held our spies. Remember, they held human rights violators in their mines over there. Remember the proxies they had in North Korea, Vietnam. But we had wise presidents, from Nixon to Reagan, others, that said, let's take the major danger, a nuclear annihilation, off the table.
Do you think they're official deals? Do you think that there are deals that were made saying, you know, a few months from now we're going to release the hostages, we just don't want to be seen as having capitulated?
Don't know that. I'd like things to be transparent. Let me tell you one deal that people don't talk about. Remember at the beginning of this, where we took those missile defense systems that were about to be put into Czechoslovakia and Poland to defend us from an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile from Iran? President Obama said, let's take them out. Under the table was kind of a quiet quid pro quo that Russia, which didn't like them, would apply sanctions, which they did, on Iran. But you know what we also did? We upgraded our software in the Aegis destroyers, and that missile system we replaced now protects from ballistic missiles in 2018 Israel. So there are things that sometimes happen that enhance our security like that.
A couple other questions on this, and we'll take a quick break. The one thing is that some people are upset that we basically seem to turn the keys over to the United Nations on this, since the Security Council has done what they've done. Did we do that?
No. Look, the United States is best when it leads international organizations. We've done that since this World War II ended. 65 defense organizations we led. Those types of IMF and World Banks that we led. Look, when we went into Iraq, we almost went alone, and we owned the suitcase of it afterwards, and we're still going back in against ISIS. It's better to have that coalition that we lead in the world. That's our strength.
Christians are being persecuted in the Middle East, in China, and in other nations. What should we be doing about that?
Oh, we should be doing what we've done historically. We should be denouncing human rights violations, put in its proper means in order to balance it. Remember what we did with the Soviet Union. We had that amendment where certain things couldn't be traded because they wouldn't let those of the Jewish faith be extracted. And I don't think we've done sufficiently with China. And by the way, I honestly believe that China should be the strategic center of our interest over this year, because that has to do with our economic, our financial, our diplomatic, and our security interest as they build basically reefs that are artificial aircraft carriers in the South China Sea. That's why we have to resolve Iran to some extent, keep an eye on it, and shift our attention globally over to that area of the world.
And we'll stand by. More with former Congressman Joe Sestak, including what's going on in his campaign. Ahead on In Focus on PHL17. Back on In Focus, I'm Steve Highsmith. Republican Senator Pat Toomey faces re-election next year. Democrats will vote next spring to nominate a challenger. With me is one of the candidates seeking that nomination. Joe Sestak is a former congressman from Delaware County and a retired admiral in the U.S. Navy. What did you learn from your last run?
It's all about people. It's why I went back after I didn't win. That very next morning, downtown Philadelphia, began shaking hands at 6 a.m., and then I went to every county to thank them. I think, by and large, the institutions, whether it's Republican or Democratic leadership, whether it's Wall Street leadership, have forgotten that our Constitution begins with we, the people, and touching them and listening to them and walking in their shoes even more became most important to me in this effort.
Are there two Joe Sestaks? Because when people hear that Joe Sestak, they don't get why some in the Democratic leadership seem not to want you to be the nominee.
Well, look, if Washington, D.C.'s Democratic Party leadership wants a hand-picked, controlled candidate, I'm not their guy. In the Navy, I learned as captain of a ship, unit, you were held accountable for those men and women on your command. You weren't above accountability. It's about them. Take care of the sailors that take care of the mission. I think leadership is important if it's the right leadership and cares about people. And so that's what I focus on, not the leadership, because frankly, leadership in this nation has let us down.
So if people say to reporters, privately, he doesn't play well with others. How do you interpret that when these Democrats who say that?
I played extraordinarily well with people, but also my first 2 years in Congress. Steny Hoyer said I was the most productive congressman, with 20 pieces of legislation passed, bipartisan, from autism to small business to defense, in my class that had gone down there. We did the same thing the second time, kept the office open 7 days a week. We handled 4 times the constituency cases of the average congressional office to take care of people. That's working with people both down there and up here.
Congressman Shaka Fattah has been indicted on corruption charges. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know the specifics. Actually, if you know, one of my interns that I had hired away when I came to television station said, why don't you come and work for me years ago, actually works for him. I just don't know much about it. But I do know this. In the broader scheme, and why I walked across this state 422 miles, the biggest deficit we have in America today, Steve, is not the national debt, it's the trust deficit. Who's been held accountable for not finding the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, for the Wall Street meltdown, for post-Katrina? That's why people don't trust anymore.
Katie McGinty, why are you better than she?
I'm focused on one thing. I'm focused on people. And I'm focused that a best representative, a better representative than Senator Toomey, who actually doesn't say something up here like take care of veterans, and then goes down to Washington and has voted against every veterans bill since he's been a congressman up to this December. He actually sent me and voted to send me to war. I have a picture with him on my aircraft carrier battle group as we're bombing away. Came home after sending me to war with my fellow vets and has voted against every, even standalone, bill supporting veterans since that time as a congressman through December. That's not right.
If you're going to make that case, you're going to have people power and support, but you're also going to need a lot of money.
Yes.
How would you describe your fundraising efforts to point?
Tied with any other Democrat who is going against an incumbent Republican senator. Well, we may be 100,000 less, but what we did consciously is started early. Successful generals win, then they go to war. And I did 200 events every year for the last 4 years for others throughout the state. I even did a Republican and a couple independents, but I wanted to walk across the state to show people that I was willing to walk in their shoes. And sure, we took a dip, but we planned on that. I wanted to make sure that people most of all knew I wanted to address the trust deficit. It isn't just becoming a senator. It's being able to govern with the will and support of the people.
When you talk about trust deficit, I know that you've been a supporter of Hillary Clinton in the past, but when you see all this controversy going on now about emails and private server and the Benghazi situation, should the Democratic Party be thinking that they need to have a plan B?
I think the Democratic Party, or excuse me, I think she should be able to say, I need to be a lot more transparent and put everything out there. And if a mistake was made, be held accountable for it. Look, I believe accountability, answering not for one's words, but for one's deeds, is absolutely the issue of trust that we don't have today. Like I said about Senator Toomey, he says we need a transportation bill up here. But then he led the filibuster of the transportation bill and said, I told you we'd kill it, and we did, to the Tea Party. That's saying something and voting the other way against we the people.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. Are you saying that you haven't heard enough from her, that it is possible she committed, knowingly or unknowingly, a crime?
I don't know that, but you asked me earlier about Shaka Fattah. There should always be an investigation. We did that in the Navy when we lost a plane. You know, let there be accountability, and if it's right, it's okay. If it's not right, there shouldn't be. I'm about accountability.
More with Joe Sestak in a moment on PHL 17. Stay tuned. In Focus continues on PHL 17. I'm Steve Highsmith. We're talking the U.S. Senate and more. With me is former Congressman and retired U.S. Navy Admiral Joe Sestak, who is a candidate for the 2016 Democratic Party nomination for U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. Been a lot of controversy the last couple of weeks involving Planned Parenthood, a video released by a pro-life organization. What's your take on that?
I think some of the remarks that were made seemed, quite frankly, a bit callous. I think that
remarks by the Planned Parenthood.
Yes, official. I think in a sense that if there is, as I said in the earliest segment, there's suspicion that some law might have been broken. There should be held accountability investigation. But I believe this, that the funding needs to continue, particularly for those who are indigent and underserved. Think about it. Cancer screenings for them, mammograms for them. I mean, this has to do with women's health. But like a captain of a ship, you lose a plane, there's an investigation that goes on if that was had to do. Accountability is important, but what Planned Parenthood does is important.
Immigration reform. it seems to get no traction. Again, what moves us off the dime?
Courage. Look, John McCain and Ted Kennedy came to a bipartisan agreement. When I was running, I came on your show the first time, I was running against Kurt Weldon. I think you even brought it up. That same bipartisan bill, which didn't succeed, nor the one between Bush and McCain, all the way to the recent one in this administration, which was bipartisan. Our own Senator Toomey, voted against it. Means that people lack courage to put something behind us, to where we actually have a principled compromise without compromising your principles. Really take a heat from the far left, the far right, to say this is what's needed for America to get on to even more important issues.
The Dodd-Frank bill.
That's why I'm running.
Dodd-Frank bill is about 5 years old now. The financial reform, accountability legislation. Is it working?
Yes, in many areas. A little too much on small businesses to create 70% of all jobs. Look, in the book that I wrote, Walking in Your Shoes to Restore the American Dreams, it costs 40% more for a small business to handle regulations than it does for big business. But the damage they could do without it is so minimal compared to Wall Street. And so those things. But think about what's in there. And so when Pat Toomey votes against it, it has an office that my fellow service members, with young sailors, you've been on naval bases, you walk out and there's loan sharks out there. I went in there and had my car repaired. As I was at sea, I came back and said, we just had to replace all your tires and the brake system. I said, I just wanted a checkup. He said, we can't let anything out of the shop that isn't safe to us. I said, let's go to court. Young sailors, 18, 19-year-olds, are just taken advantage of, and that bill protects them. Those are the kinds of things it does on mortgages, that people don't go off and try to loan shark them on mortgages. It helps consumers, people, which is why Senator Toomey's against it.
What would you do as a U.S. Senator that would give people confidence that the economy is going to be better for them and their children?
I would focus upon small business. They create 70% of all jobs, but they're only on the football field half the game. Today, they create 18 new small businesses for every 10,000 working citizens. You know what it was during Ronald Reagan's era? 36. Imagine if 36 new small businesses were springing up, that you had two halves of the game, 18 and 18.
Does that mean people should vote Republican?
Not at all, because it continued under Clinton, and then all of a sudden it went down. And so what we have to do is to make sure that the mother's milk for small business, access to capital, is given. Relieve them of the regulatory burden. Philadelphia's had a negative 4% growth in small businesses in the last 35 years. In Pennsylvania, our small business growth is half of the nation's, therefore our job creation is. Focus on small businesses. I was vice chairman of the Small Business Committee. As a freshman, I thought they wanted to show they had a sense of humor. You know why? There's no PAC money for small businesses. So Congress members focus not on small businesses, except with the words. They focus on the large corporations and other things, and other, like Energy Committee.
What do you think Senator Toomey's biggest failing is?
Saying one thing in Pennsylvania and doing something exactly opposite down in Washington, D.C.
Don't all politicians do that?
That's why the biggest deficit we have in America is trust. And if a crew of a ship feels that its captain isn't trustworthy, then the ship disintegrates into disorder. And that's what's happened in America. Everywhere I go, I say, do you trust your politicians? And when I bring up that Senator Toomey has said, stop the education loans, that I bring up that he says, stop, do not, and he stopped the Paycheck Fairness Act where the woman doesn't get the same amount as the guy. He opposed that they should have equality. But yet up here he says, take care of women. No, that's the biggest deficit there is. You can have a disagreement of whether vets should be able to have a VA bill or not, but don't come up here and say, too high is the suicide rate of my veterans. And then you go down there and votes against the standalone bill, bipartisan, that would have funded for PTSD treatment. I will go this week to visit my vets in Grady Ford Prison. Take care of our vets. Don't just say you want to, but vote that way.
You confident about your chances at this stage?
I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't want, first of all, to serve again. This country gave me my daughter with her brain cancer, with the best health care we could have in the military. And that's why I got into politics. I was an independent. Still today I'm an independent who happens to be a Democrat, to work for health care. And having gone throughout the state, 200 events each year, not just Democrats, I did, as I mentioned, Republicans, but also issues of rural development or life sciences. Yes, I'm confident that I can serve these people, with our people, with their support.
We'll talk again. Thank you, sir, for sharing your time with us. Thank you. Good luck. Be safe. And that's In Focus for this week. Thank you for watching. I'm Steve Highsmith. Enjoy your weekend and have a great week ahead.